Thank you all for coming. This is a very exciting day for us. I don't think anybody here knows me, so I'll let you know that I am from Faculty Development. My name is Jeffrey Ryman, and I'm the coordinator for the Center for Excellence in Teaching. And to my right is James Pierce.
Hello.
From IT and the proprietor of the faculty research space. So this has been a joint venture, and I just want to tell you a little bit about it before we get started. Everybody's talking about new media, everybody's talking about VR, augmented reality, and very few people are actually doing anything about it. Well, today we have people who are doing something about it and with it, who are your esteemed colleagues, and we also have some students. And I just want to acknowledge them all before we begin. First of all, I want to thank Anthony Caparelli from Fashion Illustration, Brian Emery from Photography, recently graduated practitioner Silvana Fazzolari, Kyle Farmer, Fashion Design MFA, and with him, not right here at the moment, is Amy Sperber, who also happens to be a colleague and a student in the MFA, Jacob Hooker, and Kritika Manchanda. Thank you. Okay, and then bringing up the end is going to be Reginald Rogers, and he's going to be presenting with a collaborator from a company called IWD. His name is Baptiste Martin, and he's over there. So the way today is going to work, we're going to have these presentations that are going to show you boots on the ground action in terms of what our colleagues, our practitioners are doing. We're going to have a Q&A period where all the chairs will be filled up. And then at the conclusion, at the conclusion of the presentations, there'll be lunch. And then over here on this side, we'll have two different tilt brush setups for you to actually try. In addition to that, Kyle and his team, actually probably the students will be showing their work. And they'll be sharing that over there as well. You'll be able to put on, it's over here, I'm sorry. You'll be able to actually put on headgear and check out some of the work. And then over here, Reggie will share what he's been doing, both in his class and his practice. So it's not a passive environment, but we do want you to hear these presentations first. So I would like to welcome you, and also would like James just to say a few words about the faculty research space.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So we opened the faculty research space in October. Our mission was written by the Faculty Senate IT Committee. We're really new. Some of you have used our resource, some of you haven't. You may have seen we've already offered a number of workshops in things like 3D scanning and 3D printing and augmented reality. Pretty much all of the faculty that are presenting today have used our resource in some capacity. Later today, if any of you are interested, we'll be having a little show and tell up in the space. Our website is of the regular FIT website /FRS for faculty resource space. We've already trained dozens of faculty, no experience necessary in 3D printing and scanning. And we have a new member of staff with us, Brandon Rush, who's actually at the back of the hall over there. He comes from MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art, and has experience in VR, 3D printing. So we also are working with faculty to take no experience necessary and consult with you guys a little further. So welcome. Hopefully today will be very informative, a lot of fun. We're also getting a really high quality video of this taken so that you can share this with your students and colleagues, and the event will live on. Thanks.
Anthony, one thing I've learned being in the CET is to partner with IT. You get incredible support. I mean, we have cameras, we have lighting, and we also have a good team between the two of us. I really appreciate it. Anthony, come up and do your voodoo.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tony Caparelli from the Illustration Department. when I was first asked by Jeffrey to come on up here, being a Cro-Magnon man, brought up with stretching canvases and pencils, and which I still do. I was afraid I was going to do my imitation of Chef of the Future, and everything come crashing down, and all the technology kind of run away on its own. But I've been here as an adjunct at FIT for 21 years now. And I've worked in the AAS, the BFA program, as well as the Educational Opportunity Program here, and our high school students, the junior high and high school students. So got a pretty good involvement here at the school in terms of the type of students. I also work with animation students, with the drawing component as well, too. So, and I've taught also at Seton Hall, so I've had non-art students to kind of play around with and see how they deal with some of these concepts as well, too. So I have a little video presentation here that I'm going to show. Talk a little bit about what I do. You'll see what I do in the bridge into working with the students and what's moving on in the future. So let me just hit this now. All right. So what I've done is I work in editorial. There we go. Advertising, corporate. I won't show you some of the boring stuff like drawing jock straps or resolve carpet cleaning rainbows and all that, but I've found my way into sports. So I work from 15-foot oil murals to watercolors to some traditional animation. There's a traditional art studio with no VR in the background that I've done. There's some computer sketching for some sports cartoons and that sort of thing, and combinations, and movement and color are a big part of what I like to do. And I love the idea of bringing movement and color into the virtual world as well, too. Again, traditional techniques of which I teach here, and many of the students, this is the background they come from. A lot of my works wind up with professional teams, New Jersey Devils in particular. I've done a lot of things with them, and some of you guys saw me on the street corner with that, which has actually got us quite a bit of publicity. I used to have students draw the New Jersey Devils mascot, and actually Yogi Berra joined a couple of our extravaganzas there. And so when I went into the VR lab, I decided, well, with an hour and a half to go, what should I do? So I just started doodling the mascot. And drawing in VR presents some interesting things. So you can see this is a little different. I had to call my chiropractor, because if you want to draw from the bottom up, you tend to start that way, from the bottom up. So drawing in that space and kind of communicating that with students, especially after they're digital, and I've been drawing my whole life traditionally, a little bit of a challenge. But walking around the space, you have to know your subject. So I'm putting my pride aside to show you my very first doodle with that. You can see the space is there. There's a taped square that will come up with the headset. You will see the parameters and know kind of when it's like tilt. You'll see the guides let you know that it's time to get back into the square there. All right, so that's what you're seeing through the glasses. It looks kind of like the New Jersey Devils piñata as opposed to the mascot. And I posted this for some people to take a look at. And again, I've put my pride aside to do it, but it's very interesting. There'll be a couple of things you'll notice I'll point out when you see some of the students work and what they've been doing too. So you have to kind of know your subject, like I said. You have to walk around it. You can't guess. If you draw on a flat sheet of paper, that's one thing. But if you haven't thought about the connections in a posterior view, well, and that's a freaky thing. To be able to actually, like a multi-plane camera, put on some areas like that and not be hot. It kind of felt weird, a little bit of adjustment. All right, so because we teach anatomy, I drew a little kind of a gestural skeleton underneath and just started creating a little bit of a character around it. Again, this is about an hour and a half in the lab. And the brush I was utilizing was like drawing with tape. Like drawing with strips of tape. But now you can see that there are some areas where it sticks up from there. Very interesting. And of course, our lab help was wonderful. Yeah, I was always afraid I was going to, tear the whole place apart. But yeah, pretty freaky. But look, you can walk right inside there if you need to. So these are some sketches that we normally have from like EOP, these EOP students from this past summer. And I actually got a chance to introduce them to VR. So, traditional approaches, some are illustration majors, very gestural, playing with colors, becoming a little bit more abstract. And then voila, I throw them into tilt brush. And the first thing that they really enjoy is just the color, the vibrancy, and they just start hitting buttons. What is that? Oh, a star. I can paint with stars. Oh, look at that. I can walk across the room or project myself to someone else's artwork and either collaborate with it, step inside of it. So at the beginning, it's kind of like, goofing around. Whoa, she said. Yeah, that's the that's the reaction usually. And now this student actually can draw very well. So you will notice the gestures, the way she moves around. She immediately starts going for the brushes, tries to see what she can utilize from them, and makes almost like a little mini palette on the side for herself to use, which she can erase too. Now here's the other thing again, drawing around an object. And watch, it becomes almost like a dance. Remember what I said about negative space and color and movement. Even in my artwork, the sports world that I deal with, it's something that is very intriguing to me. So to watch students, how they perceive space, how they move within it, and this is just her having a blast in it at this point. She did not want to let go. She was like, I can see why 8 hours would be great. Now, here's an animation student who actually took very well to sketching like this. He had nicer movement, nice fluidity, probably even better than some of the pencil drawings on the paper. However, he's not moving much, if you notice. And I want to show you one of the things students will get used to right off the bat, or will have to. And you'll see him hesitate right there. Okay, watch. And you'll see why. Uh-oh, see that? Yeah, that becomes something that you have to get used to. So he was doing that sketch much like, how to draw Spider-Man, or how to draw, those books that show how to draw comics and stuff. Now we have to start thinking a little bit differently, not just about the space, but what we call points in anatomy. Now here's an illustration student doing the same thing. He's imported a model that he's created. So he's done some sketches, created a model for a senior project just for a portion of it, and brought it in, and he realized the same thing. Now he can select the object, and that's the object he imported, an OBJ object. So you can create in 3D programs and bring the models in, then work into them. And there he is, you can see now as he starts to move around and gets used to the virtual space, drawing in VR. See how he moves underneath? He's got the placement much better. So he's goofing around, giving it some Mickey Mouse ears there. But they're actually connected. And you can see now that he's becoming much more, interested in understanding of the space. So if I bring students to do sketches at the Met, or, look at the way other classical drawings are done, you can see around the edges in the drawing. The student doesn't always understand line correctly. They see it as a thin line. They don't look around it. They don't know that each line has a form on the other side. And even if they're doing cartoon art, that's something that I find has been lost to a large extent. So if we go back to anatomy drawing, you're going to see some interaction with a student in a second. If we're just drawing a deltoid, historically we've looked at charts. We obviously bring in the model, and then we do the drawings. Now, if you watch here, if you look at his face, you can see he knows this is starting to go awry a little bit. We've imported a model here of a skeleton. So now he can be a little bit more precise in the class. There's no
the humerus. Just go directly to, and you can keep, you can sketch it. All right, now step to the side a little bit to see. Okay, all right. So look, now change that line a little bit. No. Get rid of that last one. Good. All right. Kind of go sketchy from toward the about a third of the arm. Again, just put a little point right on the third of the humerus, not the rib cage. The upper arm.
Yeah, 1/3 down.
Yeah, go and just mark it about a third down, just like a dot. Just put a dot. Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, now go from where you had that point on the clavicle. Now, and you can walk around as you draw it. No, 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 not there. You're going to continue the line, the first line that you did, but you're going to make it more precise to that point. Go to the clavicle,
Okay.
that very point. Right, and you're going to go there. Now step to the side. So as you draw, yeah, look, see how you're moving it in toward the bone now?
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of move as you draw. This way you're drawing in the 3D space.
I see.
Yeah, all right, so do that. And then what's the other insertion point for the deltoid? In the back, the posterior view. Where does it go to? What bodily landmark? Bony landmark. Right, spine of the scapula, about, yep, like that, good. So now remember, you're going to draw to that same point. Good, there you go. Okay, that's not bad. Kind of, okay, all right. So start filling it in a little bit. Go, like, you can even use, see the clavicle there?
Yeah.
Just keep drawing lines down to that, from the clavicle to that point. Right to that point you had on the humerus. Don't go over, don't make a loop over, just keep going from those two bony landmarks, the clavicle
Just
and the
forced to
spine of the
discipline
scapula.
himself to the actual
Just kind of
points.
fill it in, like scribble in there, just so you have it right. Because think about it, that's how the muscle fibers work, good. Right, don't go into the rib cage, just keep going straight up. See, it's starting to look like a deltoid. Yeah. Okay, good. Now take a look at that for a second. You see the outer contour? It's actually, that's closer to what the outer contour looks like. You can see it actually angle from the acromion process there. It kind of angles down into the humerus. If you had continued doing the drawing the way you did originally, you would have just had a big bubble. All right?
Okay, so here's some examples of some of the objects being imported. Some of the programs already start with some basic geometric constructions, which if you've ever read a Robert Beverly Hale book on classical drawing, you know that that's one way that we, as artists, see the figure. First the general, then the particular. Animators, the same thing. They're looking for basic geometric constructions. So this was one of the students who at the beginning was a little puzzled by the spatial component or the spatial understanding working with in the space. But now it's much more intuitive to the fact where he can actually draw with the model itself. This is very much like ZBrush. There is a free version of a 3D program online called Sculptress for those that want to mess around with that sort of thing. So it's kind of digital sculpting. And if you need your car painted, Joe picked up to this nice. In fact, in this particular program, this is Masterpiece. You can select an object so that you're working directly and painting on it. And these are some of the models that were done for an illustration class, oddly enough. Most of the students are not doing this. This particular student decided to do some modeling and rigging on his own to introduce it, and now he's going to bring it into virtual space. So very, very helpful in planning out. And here Joe is taking some of his creations, his doodles that he's going to bring into virtual space. So imagine storyboarding this way too. And that's what the lab looks like. So, in conclusion, imagine a room, if you're an instructor and you're teaching anatomy drawing. I'm sure we're going to get to this point. I don't know when, but it's there, where everyone's got their kind of like Google glasses or their glasses on. And at the table, they have a virtual skeleton. And you can have the model, right? And you can do the drawings, you can look at the model, you can walk around, and then you can either test the students, or it will force them to find where those, points are on, let's say, on the figure. Okay, and actually draw them. And at that point, they understand it even better. So I don't want to take the art out of art school. I'm a firm believer in drawing, getting the hands dirty, all of that. But I'm also a believer in what can be done and how it can be expanded and how the two can work together. I think it's a very exciting time. I wanted to show it at kind of a cursory level, kind of the way the students see it. It's already getting even more involved. They will take it further than I can take it. Thanks again for your time.
So exciting to see, so exciting to see what our colleagues are doing. I now know where my deltoids are attached. So next, I'd like to invite Brian Emery and Silvana Fazzolari.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. So I'm going to talk very, very briefly, and then I'm going to pass it on to a recent alumni here, Silvana, who did a wonderful project last year, and she's going to talk about that project. But what I wanted to quickly set up is sort of the class structure and the sort of curriculum structure that I feel I'm in a little bit as a faculty member here. And it sort of presents, I'm going to talk about the class that Silvana made this project in, and then she'll talk about the project that she made in that class. So I'm calling this Pathways to Emerging Technology, Negotiating New Technology in Old Curricula. I do find that we're in a bit of a difficult situation here at times where there can be a battle between curriculum that sort of has like certain methodologies and things sort of embedded into it that sort of have a history to it. And how do we negotiate that with new technology? How do we kind of keep a sense of sort of traditional skill sets while we're also investigating emerging technology? So this course that I teach is called Multimedia Concepts. It's a 400-level course, so it's for 7th semester photo majors, and it's required for all photo majors. And this is the way, at least in photography, the way it is that pretty much all students in the photography major have to take all the same photography classes. They can take selectives in other departments, they can take liberal arts classes, they have a choice, but they don't really have any choice within the photography major itself. They have to take X amount of classes, and they all take exactly the same classes. And this is one of them in the 7th semester. It was developed about 15 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, to introduce new media into to photography students. This was very important. You know, at the sort of turn of this century, new media basically meant video art. And it's very important for photography students to understand the difference between still and motion, and be introduced to motion and understand how to create motion and all of these things. That's now sort of become second nature. Now photographers need motion. It's not a question anymore of whether it should be integrated into their 7th semester of education. It's just like a requisite. And the problem is that even though this course was written with the idea of new media as a sort of topic in the course description and in the learning outcomes and things, the idea of new media within photography sort of ossified and became simply understood as video. So it no longer meant this kind of like emerging idea or new stuff coming down the pike. It just sort of became kind of, it ended up in this container that we understand as video. So multimedia concepts, even though it was developed to teach new media, which used to be a sort of a new and emerging media in the photography field, it's now sort of obligated to teach video because it didn't really exist anywhere else in the curriculum. So we sort of became stuck with this situation where we have to teach video because the students need to get it, and it's the 7th semester, so we now didn't really have any room to explore the other new media, the other emerging technologies that were coming down, coming along as things have been developing. So I still always felt it really important to find ways to try to introduce new media and emerging technologies as contemporary concepts. So, okay, I don't have time to go into great detail with them in class. We can't necessarily spend entire units on emerging technology, but I felt it really important to at least deliver the concepts as much as I can in a few lectures, if not, since I don't have a major portion of the semester to deal with it. So some of the new technologies that I've been introducing over the past 5 or 6 years is RGB plus D video and depth scanning. So basically photogrammetry, or ideas where you're using RGB cameras and a depth sensor like a infrared sensor to create photographically created three-dimensional images, 3D models. So I show them artists that use RGB plus D, and in some cases I'll give examples with my own equipment. 360 video is a new one we're starting to try to at least talk about conceptually if we can't really get our hands on it too much. Virtual reality, obviously, especially with using Google Cardboard, and as well with headsets. And then certainly augmented reality with phone apps, and I hope everybody has been looking at the new New York Times augmented reality stuff with the Olympics. It's just phenomenal, and it's a great example of RGBD, depth scanning, and photogrammetry, and all of these kinds of wonderful things. So why are these things important? Why do I find it important to integrate these into the class at some level? All of the listed technologies that I talked about are strictly photographic processes. VR is an exception. VR can be made strictly computer generated, but also there's a lot of VR content out there that's photographic. It's made with cameras. It's not strictly computer generated and made as animation, but made using both photogrammetry objects or 360 video or all sorts of other ways of using photography to develop 3D. RGB and RGB plus D, or the depth scanning, or all of the 3D scanning stuff, it's just using RGB cameras and computational processes to create 3D models. So this is all stuff in the photographic universe. It's very important to me that our students sort of get a sense of what's in the photographic universe, not just the simple core skills that one type of traditional photographer may use. I'm going to get back to that in a second. The other thing is that all of these are emerging technologies, so they're used prominently in various industries. They're out there all over, again, in the photographic universe, but they're not yet standard practice or tool sets in the traditional commercial photography industry. So this becomes very tricky because, again, if I come back to curricula or curriculum for our program, I think the way that we've developed curriculum is that we sort of look at these sort of intersectional skills, these very fundamental skill sets that every photographer might need to use. And that's what we focus our entire curriculum on, so those intersectional skills, so that we can say, this is something we're sure everybody's going to need. And the problem is it doesn't necessarily leave a lot of room for the things that are in the margins a little bit, or the other things out in the universe that people are using, lots and lots and lots of people are using, but they're not necessarily core skills. You don't need it. You don't need this to get a job. But you may be able to do really interesting things, and you may find tools and find ways of working with photography that haven't been thought about yet, or that not a lot of people are doing, but they could be really valuable and have a lot of great interest to the student. So I think it's really important to introduce them to this. I want them to see as much of the edges of that universe as possible. And I find that a lot of them haven't up until this point. So what are some solutions for this? Well, one thing, luckily we have a new photography curriculum. A lot of the departments I know in A&D at least are rolling out entirely new curriculum, curricular programs. Luckily our program is moving a lot of that video content and things down into the AAS, so hopefully the BFA is going to start to open up and have a little bit more space again to start dealing with more experimental and more emerging technologies. Secondly, I found this FRS to be wonderfully useful, and so last semester, for the first time I was able to bring my students in there. So what I did, and I'll be a little bit more careful here, so I just brought the students in for sort of free play. I wanted them to see a bunch of these technologies and be able to experience them and get their hands on them. So this is a student of mine, grabbed a 360 camera, and as you can see, I'm sort of zooming around, and he just was sort of walking through the the space and kind of playing with the 360 camera, trying to understand how that works. At the same time, we had multiple students on different VR setups, looking at different photogrammetric elements that were used in VR. We had an AR demo going on, and then I was doing some 3D scanning, which is sort of one of my kind of prominent art practices, is using 3D scanning. So, sorry, that's not really fun to watch the cabinetry. But so it was just kind of interesting to bring the students in, and they got really, really excited looking at this stuff that they had never seen or thought about before. And I think that's a great opportunity that the FRS it allows for. So looking ahead, I would love to look towards and have conversations about more flexible course options for major students. I would love to take some consideration in the future about the possibility of an a la carte approach as opposed to a one-size-fits-all, so that we don't have to only kind of focus on certain intersectional skills, but we can also look at other things that are going on and give students opportunity to navigate this, again, in my case it's photography, so to navigate the photographic universe a little bit on their own. But the reality is that the most reliable solution in all of this is just to have excellent students who are going to push the limits anyways, and who are going to go outside of what you're teaching and push further than what the curriculum can allow for and all of these things anyways. So which brings me to this wonderful alumni, Silvana, who did this great project last year. And this is her on a shoot scanning a model in one of our studios. And so I'd like to hand it over to Silvana to talk about her project.
Thanks. So I was one of those students that went to the edge that Brian was talking about because I was interested in it. So my project, thank you. So for my project, it was kind of an evolution over a long period of time. I had this vague idea of hearing things about virtual reality and 3D scanning from a brief topic that we talked about very briefly, probably less than an hour in Brian's class. But I was fortunate enough to have heard of this and never would have heard of it unless he mentioned it, and I just decided to see what it was all about. But I started, there's kind of an evolution to the point I got to with the VR. So back in, right before the start of my senior year, this was my last project where I wanted to explore interactive photography, like how can I make photography interactive? So I created this piece where I shot the same model front and back as you would see in an e-commerce ad, and generated QR codes for each of them. So when you went up to the piece, you could scan the QR codes with your phone, and your phone would take you to designated web pages that kind of encompassed the story as you explored all the different web pages. So this was the step one. So I kind of led my senior project by these key research questions, because I was really searching to find how close to real life of an experience I could create. So how far can I push a fashion image beyond photography, beyond video? Like what comes next? How much more real can it get? So this was a particular quote that really stuck with me for the entire duration of my project. The ultimate empathy machine. VR is a machine, but through this machine we become more compassionate, more empathetic, and we become more connected. Ultimately, we become more human. So I began researching beyond the scope of the aesthetics of an image and more about, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words here. The different trends that were going on in society and psychology as well. People were tending to be more interested in experience rather than actual items. And according to WGSN fashion forecasting reports, I kept referencing those as well. They said, it's kind of ironic, back in 2016 when I was looking at them, they said that by 2018 there will be more connected network devices on Earth than humans, topping at 7.8 billion. And here we are in 2018. And I believe it now with all the Alexas and Google Homes and watches, and each one of us probably has 3 or 4 connected network devices on us right now. So I figured, why not take an approach to fashion photography that's generating 200% more engagement in the market rather than a still image alone. So it set me off to start this experiment. So where do I start? What is VR? How does it work? So, I didn't really know exactly what my project was going to look like in the end. I just knew that each step of it would bring me something new, and it was just going to be an exploration rather than a point A to point B project. But I faced a lot of new challenges in creative directing something that has so many different dimensions. I had to consider multiple senses that I wasn't considering before with just a still image alone. Things that would normally be consumed in one sense, now I had to worry about 5. So step 1 was to experiment with seeing something from all 3 sides. Okay. So this was my first project. It was a still and audio assignment where I took the opportunity to explore what 360 meant. So being able to see something from multiple sides, but this happened to be in a 2D, still in a 2D plane. So I took the model and rotated her in each of the outfits and took 15 to 20 images and stitched them all together as a stop motion. So this was kind of step 1 in what does 360 mean. Now why can't I? Okay. So then I got into now exploring 3D scanning and how that works. So I actually took the images from that last project and stitched them together to make 3D renderings out of them. So now I had these 3D objects that, you know, I could see them, I could move them around, great, but now I want to see them in a headset. I could put them in a headset now, so how do I do that? So you could see these are, you know, this is just a video, but if you were, you could manipulate the model yourself. And this is just made up of a series of images.
And I, by the way, had no idea how to do that, so I couldn't help her.
So after the photogrammetry and 3D scanning, RGBD video was the next step closer to what's real, being able to have these 3D scans moving or just to have full scans and be in the space with them. And this is where I really started reaching out to Brian and I started working very, very much so outside of the scope of the traditional photography elements. And I was fascinated and in total awe every step of this project, from the gathering of the data, what the renderings looked like, what the infrared scan process happened. Like, that's not even part of the final project. It's, you know, that's just the little thing that's happening while it's scanning. And I was just, it was just all so interesting to me. But being that I was working with, this is just a little clip of being on set. So when you're 3D scanning, you actually have to walk around the object, or in this case, this model. So it was totally physically a different experience as well, because I had to walk around and it was just a different mode of thinking. But being that I was working with this new media, each step was 100% a new problem-solving mission. So I had these 3D models scanned by this software that I didn't even know about, but I had to figure it out. And Brian's like, hey, this does that. Okay, cool, I'll look into it. Okay, great, now I have these scans. How can I edit them? Okay, so now I need to use Blender and learn how to edit it from there. Okay, I want to see these 3D objects in Google Cardboard, but I'm stuck with an iPhone, so I have to learn how to code an app in Xcode, which I don't know anything about developing, to be able to see it in my Google Cardboard. But then I found out that I had access to use the HTC Vive for my project, which was a year prior to this point was like, oh, my dream, I wish I could, get it into that headset. I'll never be able, to access that. But I got word from James and Brian that I could use it for my project. Yay, I'm so excited. It's just what I wanted. Okay, now I need to know how to develop in Unity, and I need to use Mesh Mixer to edit, to drop them into Unity so I could get them into, the Vive. But I want them to move around. Okay, so I need to use Cinema 4D by Maxon. I need to teach myself how to animate and do scripts, and it was a journey. It was a journey. But this is just a little video that I had playing on the wall during my exhibition. It was just another component. So this just kind of shows what the things look like while they're processing and during capture, and it's a lot of data gathering, and you could see the particle clouds of the 3D video. It's just a minute long. But I would say that, yes, there was definitely a learning curve, just a little one. I remember the first time it was time to put up your work for critique, I said to Brian, how do I pin this project to the wall? I'm not really sure how to approach this, but I just had to show my classmates kind of my process. That this is all I had at the time, so I just showed them these things to try to, interpret and discuss what I had going on. But what was interesting about that portion was it was mostly, I'm missing a slide. It was mostly questions going back and forth, which I had that was my reaction too. I just had tons of questions about their questions, and why are you, why do you think that? And it was just a very interesting class dynamic. But at the exhibition, that was its own project and its own experiment, because it was, I got to see each person react to the project differently and figuring out how to set it up, and I could only have it up at certain times because someone needed to be there to man the equipment, but it was definitely worthwhile. So, yeah, that's it. That was my project.
Hopefully, first of all, I want to thank Brian and Silvana for soldiering through the blinking lights. I think there's a mouse that's chewing through the insulation on the cable somewhere, and hopefully we're okay. So just to restate, after all the final two presentations, all the presenters are going to be available in different parts of this room for you to meet and talk to and get some hands-on to. There's another thing also, is they're your colleagues, so you might choose to want to collaborate with them, make some kind of an arrangement to continue this conversation beyond today. So I want to welcome Kyle Farmer, and I want to point out, this is the inaugural year of the MFA. I'm going to let Kyle, of course, talk about his baby.
Don't steal my speech.
That's right. So here he is. Go. Oh, yeah. Okay. You can just...
Hi, everyone. Excuse my throat. I've got a bit of a cold. So, this is the inaugural course and program, MFA in Fashion Design. So I was lucky enough to be brought in nearly 3 years ago now to design and build a program for FIT that is a MFA in Fashion Design. This is the homepage here that you can take a look at, and there's lots of really lovely content on there. But it's a program that is, when I was set the task to design the program, I really wanted to embody the institutional name, Fashion Institute of Technology, and really embrace that in the designing of the curriculum. And the program it's small. It's 18 students per cohort. There's going to be 2 cohorts. We're in the middle of interviewing the second cohort now. And they have to apply with an idea. So there's 6 core words for the program that, so the words are experience, idea, play, focus, edit, and conclude. The experience is your personal experience. What have you done in your life, your world, that gives you something that has given you the idea that you want to come back and do an MFA in fashion design and change that word and make it your own. So, and what is the word that sort of, what are the things that have given you those ideas to want to come back and do an MFA and apply for this program? So the students are the people that I really want you to hear, because each of their projects are sort of technology driven, but I use the word craftology a lot. So they can speak to it more than I can in terms of what they're doing. But it's very much about craft and technology and how they are informing each other and kind of the same thing, just through the lens of time. So craft and technology to me are the same thing, because once upon a time you could think about a caveman with a chicken bone with a hole in it, whip stitching some leathers together. That would have been considered technology at the time. So where do we look at technology now, in the past, present, and future? And what the students are doing right now is looking at designing clothes with technologies that wouldn't normally be used in the fashion design space. So as I said, I was very fortunate to not only design the curriculum, 20 new courses. I did it in 10 weeks, you can clap. But I also got to design the studio. We're about to move into a almost 5,000 square foot space in 236. And we are very, very lucky that FIT is investing in this program the way that they are, and also allowed me to not only design the curriculum, but design the space to support the curriculum. So we not only have typical fashion design studio machines, sewing machines, overlockers, sergers, presses, but we have things you would normally find in architectural studios: vacuum formers, 3D printers, laser cutters, ultrasonic welding machines. That's my favorite one, sewing with sound. Come and have a play. Gio, our studio technician, is here. He'd welcome you to the studio to go and have a play around with this equipment. And that's what the students are doing. So I told you about these words. Experience, idea is your application. Semester 1 is play. So the work that the students are going to show you in a moment is their play, Semester 1 thesis. They're currently in thesis focus, where they're focusing on the best bits of that play with industry collaborators. And then they go into edit, where they edit the collection in the 3rd semester, and then conclude the collection in the 4th semester, where we will be presenting in various ways. We're going to do a thesis defense, where the students will all stand up in the Katie Murphy and defend their thesis, a runway show or presentation of some kind, and portfolio viewing, and an editorial book of some kind as well. So there's going to be 4 ways in which the students get to showcase their work at the end of this 2-year very fast 2 years. Can't believe 1 semester's already gone. So I'm going to hand it over to, who's up first? Jacob. And he's going to talk you through his work and go from there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jacob. So last semester with Play, I started with a heavily scholarly research process based around hoods, the connotation of hoods, and what those mean in many different contexts. And that being the initial part of my research, another part consisted of drawing and making paper sculptures. Both of those, well, the second part was a very generative process for me. So I took this into a VR space where I started making hoods in a VR space. Very abstract hoods, but here's a video of one of them. This was using tilt brush. As you can see, and as someone said before, it's a process that gives you a 2D sculpture in a 3D space, so you're painting with something that is two-dimensional, just as if you were painting. It's very 2D. So this made me pretty happy, actually. I played with this a lot. Going forward, here are some other sculptures that I did, hood-related sculptures. And as you can see, there's so many ways that this can iterate, I guess. So there's a lot you can do with this technology, like considering size and texture. Bringing those outside of the three-dimensional space is a whole other question. So I'll let this video play for a little bit longer. So these are actually prototypes of a hood that could be worn. And I don't think that there's a body form in this one, but so whoops. So this is another program that I used, Medium, which has a different basis because you're painting with three-dimensional objects as opposed to flat two-dimensional objects. So it creates a different kind of form. So here you can see me taking the hood and trying to put the hood on. So moving forward, my idea is to take some of these models that I've done in 3D space and use them as forms to drape on in order to make a two-dimensional pattern for laser cutting, knitwear, cut and sew. And so I'm in the process of figuring out how to take these models and translate them into another program that then I can use to make patterns with. This has been kind of difficult because these models are really complex. So bringing them into a space like Rhino has been challenging because Rhino doesn't like really complex things like this. So right now I'm in the process of figuring all that out. Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kritika. So sort of continuing where Jacob left off, and Kyle too, talking about craft and technology, we sort of seem to assume that the two live in different worlds. And as someone who sort of doesn't necessarily gravitate towards technology in my making, this was a very new experience for me, but I guess that's part of the play. So part of that was exploring tools that you wouldn't normally use to do the things that we're used to doing. So the starting point for this, for me, was this idea of control and the loss of control. And so for me, the idea of creating art through technology was a loss of control in a way. So this is just a very initial starting point for this, which was me using my robot vacuum cleaner to create art, which I literally taped a Sharpie to the vacuum cleaner and let it do its thing. So it's pretty nifty. Besides cleaning, it can also make art, which was fun. But yeah, so continuing from this idea, I sort of started thinking about the tools that we can use and almost using technology to create analog art in a way. So this was some prototyping I did with the 3D pen, which if you guys are familiar with, it's this pen. It's not at all a sophisticated technology tool. It's marketed to children to make plastic toys. But for me, it was just this idea of bringing back that control. So as opposed to using the 3D printer, where I would just feed in information and the machine would then do its thing, I was using this pen and sort of drawing in 3D, but not in VR, as a lot of people did, but actually physically doing it. So here's a video. And this is sped up a lot. This was a really long process. And it's almost this counterintuitive thing of using technology and not using it to be more efficient, but sort of like almost making it really painful in the way that this was me almost spinning the fiber, weaving the fabric, and making the garment, draping, patterning at the same time, which is just a different way of making, which was exciting to me. And some of the results that came out of it were these shapes that I made on the dress form. And the most exciting thing was that it doesn't necessarily look like something that was created by technology. It still has that hand quality to it, which was really important to me because this is what my work looks like. So more than anything, it was just about exploring tools that you wouldn't normally explore. And so this is the physical thing that came out of it. And yeah, I think this is a very initial starting point. I think this can go into an idea of maybe in the future you can draw your own clothes, or it's all real time. So there's no, you're eliminating the middlemen of like the textile factories and then going into the factories that are making your clothes and the warehousing. You're just literally real time making your clothes. So this is just a very initial idea. But yeah, this is what I did.
We're going to present for our classmate who's not here. Okay, so Anastasia, we are really lucky, as Kyle said, to have a studio with the greatest gadgets, and we have a embroidery machine that is incredible. And Anastasia tasked herself with figuring out ways to approach this technology, not so much as decoration, but as a construction method. So she's calling this graphic construction embroidery a construction method. What she did was engineered embroideries to be the construction and the decorative elements of a garment. She used graphic principles to create sleeve seams, side seams, and pockets.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Okay, side seams and pockets, and she was able to do this in a streamlined fashion. Jacob knows a lot more about the machine than I do, so he can kind of speak to that. This one.
Yeah, I was there while she was coming up with all this. So she basically created a system in which she made the decorative aspect of embroidery into the functional aspect of construction. She did a lot of testing to see what would be needed for this to happen. A lot of this came down to her having to align everything, and there was a lot of geometry going on here. And in the end, it came about that she had to move the hoop down the sleeve continually to create any kind of structure.
That led her to.
Yeah, which led her to the idea that moving forward, if this was something that was going to actually be used in production or anywhere else, that new hoop systems would have to be created in order for this to be a viable, functioning.
Right, and so what you see in that picture is that those letters are actually closing the garment shut. It's not seamed traditionally, it's literally using the embroidery make the 3D space in the garment. She also did it with this pocket. So this is a embroidery, but it is also a functioning pocket. It's 2 layers of fabric, and you can get your hands in to get inside, and that top kind of piece down could hold a pencil or a mag light. This was designed for outerwear, so the idea of using this in a performance space. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
You know, she's thinking about the machine definitely in a non-decorative approach.
Yeah.
So,
Translating decoration into construction. Yeah.
totally. Okay. Let me do one. So then I'm going to talk about virtual body and dimensional form. Kyle has been really great mentor for me in thinking about technology in a way that's not necessarily how we use it in fashion design. So I am exploring an iPad, a structure scanner, which is traditionally used for interiors, for that kind of that 3D photography that you guys were talking about earlier. I'm combining it with 2 other programs. I'm kind of bridging things. What happens in the iPad goes into, I take it into Mesh Mixer, and I'm going to show you a little demo of that. And then from Mesh Mixer, I'm going into Clo 4.0, which is a 3D modeling and pattern making system for fashion design. I am bypassing their avatars because I'm really interested in real body proportions, and I want the design to be dictated by the body and not the body having to conform into the pattern making. So in Mesh Mixer, I'm allowed to isolate parts of the scan and see in 3D what I'm about to drape on. So I do a lot of pre-production of the actual avatar prior to coming into the system. This is Clo. This is a static image of Clo. What Clo is a 2D and 3D system that functions at the exact same time. So when I bring in, this is a scan, I had a volunteer come into the classroom and let me scan her. It lets me bring in actual bodies, and then I develop the pattern making off of her body. I'm not developing the patterns and then trying to make it fit her. She is the standard, and it goes back to the 2D. This system literally lets me virtually drape. So I'm going to let you see that it is tactile. You can see I can get in full 360, and then I can check the fit that way. There's a whole lot of bells and whistles that Clo has that I'm not showing, but just to get the idea that I'm working between in and out of analog and digital, because then these patterns come out and we make real clothes, and we put them on this real body that I brought into this system. So yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I didn't get the top of her head. I'm a shrimp when it comes to scanning. So there you go. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I just want to speak a little bit about the reason why the program has been designed the way it is in terms of its pace. We all speak about the speed of the industry and how much, have to generate multiple collections, multiple seasons, and how that sort of impacts the mental health of designers and the culture of design. So the program has been designed for the students to take time over their work and to really explore work in a more meaningful, soulful way and actually get deep down into it. And I just always like to finish these things with, even though it's called an MFA in fashion design, the intention is that the students graduate with a title that they give themselves based on the kind of work that they're doing. So, this is just one semester's worth of work. We've only just touched base here. So we don't know where it's going. We don't know what it's going to become. And that's what's so exciting, And by the way, I'd like to offer you a place on the MFA. I really liked your work. You, yes. I think we should talk. But yeah, thank you guys, and good job. Thank you for doing that.
Something that's a little bit different about what we're doing today is usually professors are getting up and speaking on behalf of their practice for things that they've done for a long time. In this situation, professors are learning with their students. And so the professed part is the experience, the insight, the ability to take risks and inspire, but the technology is new for everybody. You know, 1984, January 28th, 1984, the first Mac, everybody started in the same place. And that's kind of where we are now. So I guess the message, Reggie, come on up. The message I wanted to just kind of share as somebody who's been doing faculty development here for 10 years is you don't have to be the master of everything to be the master juggler and to get the students stimulated and excited. I'm so proud of the students who took the time today to come. And also I want to thank part-time faculty who are participating today. Both Reggie and Anthony are here, you know, out of the goodness of their heart and the love of their practice. So I want to thank them especially for that. James. Just want to have a smooth segue for a change. We're going to follow this presentation with Q&A. Lunch has arrived. It'll be served immediately after, and then we can play. We're all going to have serious play after lunch. Reggie? Oh. You notice all the technology people up here trying to figure out how it works? It's a very humbling experience. Reggie?
Good morning. My name is Reginald Rogers. I'm from VPED. I teach, I've been here for 20 plus years. I teach merchandise lab in-store design, visual presentation in-store design, and advanced store design. I've been challenged for several years in terms of bringing relevant content to the students. One of my biggest concerns is presentation techniques. Quickly, you know, my normal practice, you know, I'll present a rendered photo image of a project, the exact image that it's going to be, and the client says, is this what it's going to look like? So what is it going to look like? So I'm really confronted with finding good, strong presentation techniques that brings clarity in terms of the design discipline that I'm presenting to the client. So in terms of my course goals, is to develop a relevant presentation technique, to find an efficient way to design, for design evaluation, to experience and discover how the space functions driven by visual merchandising principles, to use design tools for real-world concept development. In terms of the evolution of the course, we originally started out with just design project decks. We moved on to rendered 3D programs, and then I thought it was the end all. We started with animation for product presentation. It was a choreographed movement through the space, but it lacked control in terms of exploration. We moved forward into using VR headsets. I use a program called Cubity. My students, it's an internet-based 3D model. My students download the program and I go, put it in VR headsets, and I can literally walk through this space just with an iPhone. So what we're basically doing is taking an existing 3D software and we're walking through the space. In terms of evaluation, we get to identify existing in-store hotspots, areas of concern, open dialogue project evaluation, as well as what I call shared experience with the students' design expectations. You know, the determination of the customer experience. It's about freedom to experiment and play, and how do we build that into the design process? Here's an example of one of my students' projects in terms of my evaluation of the strength and weaknesses of the project. I had the ability to walk through the space, and what I thought was really cool was I got to walk upstairs through VR. And as a result, I was able to ascertain that there were some some design flaws in terms of the execution of this particular project, and we were able to solve it, discuss it, and there was open dialogue because I had the students put on their VR and says, I sent it to the area of concern, and we both agreed that there was a problem. So the students are exposed to technology, AR, and interactive experience, which is raising the expectations in not only entertainment, but retail and hospitality and food. Brands are providing virtual reality technology and packaging that can be repurposed as do-it-yourself VR headsets, as well as virtual reality. McDonald's in Sweden, they're setting VR headsets in their Happy Meals. Birchbox pens, VR in terms of their packaging. So it's about the strategy for the in-store experience, and I call it multi-sensation. Presently, we're discussing the direction of new retail. And Samsung, for the industry, really kind of set a new standard for customer engagement. Believe it or not, I had to do this as well, just to kind of experience what the visitor would experience. And in essence, going through space. Yes, I did that as well. But this is a new way of customer engagement, and it's about the customer experience. You've got to make these spaces a destination. So this was another area of Samsung. Again, it opened up a great deal of discussion in terms of not only visual merchandising initiatives, but the use of technology and how you can engage the customer and bring them back to the specific destination. We were all questioning, where would this go after seeing the original Samsung 837? It's now in Macy's Herald Square. So they've found a way to extract that experience into the actual retail footprint. So I'm trying to get the students to see the relevance and the initial movement in terms of VR, in terms of the customer experience. I don't know if you're familiar with Vera Bradley, but they launched several lines of bedding and home goods. Due to their already limited space in their location, they decided to showcase their collection in VR. And this is what you would see. You would come to the space, and what they got to do was to extend the four walls of the physical store, to share more product and to expand the brand experience. So this is where the new retail is going, and this is why we're trying to make sure that our students, at least in the advanced store design, is at the forefront of where the industry is going. The next step would be AR, and I have a colleague who will talk about the ideal tool for the VPED curriculum instruction. His name is Martin, Baptiste Martin, and he's from IWD. We've been working together for about 5 years. I first met him at Global Shop, and I was able to walk into my first VR space, and I literally accosted him. I told him he and I would be together forever now. His software has evolved to using the Samsung VR, as well as he does a lot of software for planograms and other marketing of merchandise. So I want you to come and hear his presentation that's going to complete mine. So thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. Oh, is Baptiste coming up now? Okay, I wasn't sure. Come.
Yes.
Right after this, all the presenters should take a seat here. Sorry.
Sure, that's okay.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Reggie, for the introduction. Very excited to be here and to be sharing some of the love that we have for retail technology and what we've been developing for about 15 years now. We love partnerships. We have an existing also partnership with the the equivalent of FIT maybe, but out of Paris. There is a French accent in the background. I'm not the only one tonight. What we do is we basically bring new technology in retail, and we help brands to kind of be in the 21st century when it comes to visual merchandising communication. So concretely, how does it work? Instead of doing a lot of photo shoots, a lot of Adobe Suite, Illustrator, Photoshop, we just bring a visual merchandising software to the industry. That's what we've been doing for 15 years to over about 10 different industries. So this is what planograms could look like back in the days. It was a lot of old school programs. It's a lot of efforts to copy and paste without having the right dimensions. What we bring is just something more simple, something that anybody can use and learn in about a 4-hour training. We bring all the services so that they can be working with it, whether it's 2D, whether it's 3D. It's extremely easy and quick to learn how to use this tool. This is what analysis could look like when you look at your merchandise in a store. Simply just put it into something more easily to read, easily analysis, linking products to sales, and things would highlight in different colors. Dollar square footage can be seen pretty quickly. So this has become a dream for any visual merchandiser to use such technology. This is an example of a full Uniqlo store that was built through our software. Just a click and point, move things around, duplicate, rotate. Anybody can use this. And some people don't necessarily have a graphic design background, but they do work in visual. So building a store like this, in the technology we've developed, could take about 3 to 4 hours, I would say. So these walkthroughs can be then shared the way they wish for any store openings, any remodeling of a store, testing out concept. The brands actually use this to convince retailer to give them the space that they need. So it's used as a selling tool also. Dressing up mannequins. The products are smart and they snap and adapt on the mannequins when you put them. They will be hung on a hanger, sidely hung. So Explore is how did we bring also virtual reality into the industry? The actual first project we've built was for consumer insight, focus group. Somebody, a beauty brand actually, wanted to test out a new design. But before prototyping, before rolling out, you want to test it out on people who know the brand, who love the brand, and see what their reaction could be. So what they did is, with the Polling Institute, we've tested out this new design and said, what do you see? Do you recognize the brand that you know? Do you love it? Do you not like it? They were able to fine-tune the design in order to not make mistakes in the design that they would actually build. And then they started pitching retailers and say, look at what I'm going to do if you give me that space. So it became a selling tool in that scenario. And this is an example of what the technology is for virtual reality, what we've basically developed. You don't necessarily need the actual goggles. You can use it from any smart device and just tap. You navigate with your finger and you tap where you want to go. we also see a lot of application in training the teams, actually. By putting some virtual reality devices, people will print way better the message that you want to pass on. And this is all 3D, but as many of you have said earlier, it could be photo, it could be video, it could be anything. And you can overlay some additional media devices. You can have audio, you can have a video that will pop up as you are browsing a retail space. Now, some of the R&D that we're doing, and we saw some HTC devices earlier, is the very first software we've built, which helps you to build visual layouts of stores. We've actually coupled that with HTC Vive, which allows the virtual reality to really take it to the next level. So instead of drawing, now you're merchandising virtually, but physically you're moving around. And Reggie was kind enough to be experiencing this for us, and thank you, Reggie, again. Yeah, this is a few days ago in our offices, a few blocks away from here. Oops, no. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I'd like to invite anybody to ask a question about any of the presentations you've heard today. So do I see any questions? Yes.
Jeffrey, can you repeat the question?
Are retailers using the HTC Vive for merchandise and sales?
That's extremely new.
Grab a mic, Reggie.
I'm sorry. Have you sold this to anyone? Am I the lucky one? Okay. You have to understand, this is my wish list because I teach visual merchandising, and this is the perfect tool for literally learning how to. I'm sorry. Yes, and this is new. I'm sorry. The software is new. It just came out, so no one has it. But again, I teach visual merchandising, so this is a perfect complement for my program. We teach that not only store design, but we visual merchandise. We actually merchandise the shops, we merchandise the stores, whether it's a trade show booth, that's showroom, that's what we do. So this literally is so conducive to what we teach in our particular program. I think it's conducive to yours as well. And again, it's new. So this is my wish list, and that's why I brought it to you. I've been testing his software for about 5 years now, and I've been trying to find the funds to get the perfect tool for teaching these particular disciplines. Yes.
We have one vote here. Yeah, hold on.
For Reggie again. Okay, I'm not sure I quite understood how you went from the Excel spreadsheet to the 3D presentation. What's the connection?
Because it's about analysis. It's all about analysis. When they're determining, you know, product assortment, how things sell, it's all analysis. And that's just.
Oh, there's no way to go directly say, okay,
No,
I
no,
want
no,
this
no,
style
no.
to be shown because you have a picture somewhere hidden.
One of the things, there's such a misconception about what visual merchandising is in terms of what we have to know. It's a broad spectrum. It's not just design. We have to understand, you know, how to facilitate the buyer's needs.
Right.
We need to know the merchandise. We need to know the proper fixture suite,
Okay.
the brand. We need to know what's going on in the world.
But there's no direct
Yeah.
sort of connection
Yes.
to sort of put that together
Let's
from
talk
the
about
spreadsheet.
omni-channel. I mean, we have to understand omni-channel. We have to understand, you know, how the information and the synergy from customer service to the salesperson on the floor. I mean, we have to understand the entire supply chain in terms of that's what we learn. So that's why it all becomes relevant. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
One of the things about the headgear for
Yes.
virtual reality, even putting the phone into the headgear,
Yes.
is that it's really sort of plexy. You know,
Beg your pardon?
it's kind of plexy, it's big, etc. Do you see it coming down the side?
I disagree. You're talking about his. I have a $40 headset
Yeah.
that I put on, and I put the phone in there, and I can walk through the space. And what's great about the software is there's a dot. You focus on the dot, and it takes you to that point, so you don't have to move. When you get to more complex software, you have the ability to move freely in the space. Yeah, but again, it's conducive to your major as well as mine. Yeah.
When you're wearing it, you don't think about it being.
No, you don't
clumsy.
think
It's
about
only
it.
when you're looking at somebody who's using it. But they're getting smaller and they're getting better all the way. There was a question over here.
Hi, this question was more for your partner, Mr. Baptiste. I don't know if this exists, but are they working on software for like the average consumer? If I wanted to shop in a store like H&M, where I could walk through the store and I could pick up items and view like how they look on me, or if I like the color or something.
Well, there's loads of software. There's what we call magic mirrors. There's so many different types of software and peripherals that you can use, fixtures that you can use to actually try on. You also have a 360 mirror that you can go on. Lord & Taylor, they have a dress floor. I believe it's the 6th or the 7th floor. If you go in their dressing room, they have that. You can also do what they call an Instagrammable moment. So, yes, that's where the industry is going. It's literally in the retail footprints presently.
I have a question to the lady on the left. What program did you use for you do your 3D drawing?
Oh, you mean Critica, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I actually didn't use a program at all. I just used a 3D pen. I have it with me and I could demo it after. But what it does is it basically, you insert the filament in it and it exudes melted PLA or whichever filament you use. And so I'm physically drawing, there's no program, and it's physically exuding almost like a yarn. So yeah.
We have a question right here, and I'll get around to everybody. Go ahead. Into the mic.
My question is somewhat commentary. I'm in charge of professional studies and we work with the industry. My mind is blown this morning. I am just, and in a way I'm relieved also to see all of these things happening. And I just want to say that I know most of the people in the room, a lot of you are art and design. We see those lists where somebody thinks it's just wonderful that we rank number 3, number 4, number 6 in the world. And I know what's above us. I've seen the competition, and they're not doing this. And why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we collectively re-embracing our name, Fashion Institute of Technology, that most of us were embarrassed with that name for many years, and now I'm sitting here thinking, wow, we're back to Fashion Institute of Technology. People on the outside, do they know this? When people are coming, when young people are coming here to your respective departments, are they aware that we are on the cutting edge, that we're pushing beyond the cutting edge? I worry about that. I don't know that FIT is being seen that way, and I think that it's detrimental to each of you, and it's not an aid to our students. I think we need to be talking collectively.
We'll be selling I'm from FIT and I'm proud buttons as you exit.
Congratulations to all of you. It's so impressive. Amy, I'm wondering, I'm very interested in what you're doing and what is your ultimate goal, because I feel like it's really on the cutting edge of inclusive fashion, et cetera. So what's your vision?
You've definitely nailed it on the head. It is about diversity, and it is about giving agency to everyday people who buy clothing. So I don't want to give too much away. Just a year and a half, we will launch with this grand idea. But Kyle is really, and the MFA program is really facilitating this push. So yeah.
Yeah. We're keeping some things secret. We're not putting it all out there yet, because when we do our first big graduation show events, we are definitely going to be doing what you spoke to in terms of, owning that title again, fashion and technology, and what it is, what it could be, and what it will be. And these are the people that are making that happen. And, it is a pleasure to see this already. I mean, because it's fun for me to be interviewing these people, and they know exactly what they want to do when they come in. And then I go, no. And then I push and push and push, and their brains explode, and the next thing they do, and things I couldn't even have imagined. It's a wonderful thing, and we will be being seen for being that innovative again. I really do think so.
Hi, for Brian and Tony mostly. I teach in the lower division. The classes are really large. So how do you get your class in there, and does everybody get a chance, because if I take 25 people in there, I think 25 people should be able to use whatever we're looking at. So can you talk about that a little bit? And also I just want to say thank you for showing, your first attempts at this, because it's daunting, I think, to everybody. And plus, I didn't really know what it did. So I thought it was really good to not see the slick kind of thing that it's like, I'll never achieve that, but it's like I can draw a line badly on something. I can do that. So talk about taking your classes into whatever spaces we have here. Thanks.
Here, I'll give you this grade.
Well, I'm glad to facilitate the bad drawing part too. It's that's why I wanted to show that too. It was like, you know what? Get a chance to see what it's like segueing into that, and then how the students react. Now, part of the issue is, like I mentioned, it would be nice to have, okay, everyone put on your glasses, and here's our skeleton for today, and let's start going with the insertion points on muscles, and then let's look at it and, show some classical attempts at drawing classical comic strips where they understood the line weight, and that the line didn't just do this, it went inward. Those are the type of things I'd love to do with the class together. It's very difficult now because of the cost and the technology, but the school's been very accommodating at a very early stage. In the meantime, I think the video helps, so it's in their head, it's in their thinking, even if they have to do it in small groups. When I had the small summer group and the small EOP group, everyone got a chance. Smaller groups, it's, so we have to be creative and,
I had a different approach. I made it optional, so only like half the students came, and it was fantastic because it was only people who wanted to be there, and they were really engaged, and it was wonderful. it was during a class time, but it was sort of at the end of the semester, so I was able, like half the students were able to, I was able to just let them have a work period if they wanted. Half the students, anybody who wants to come. And that way it was like really just about, they had made the choice to come. So they were really excited about it. And the other thing I will say about the FRS that's nice is they were able to set up different stations. So you could have a group of 4 or 5 students that sort of would move from station to station and have these different experiences. And like I said, I brought some of my equipment and I was doing some demos. So that was kind of nice to move people around the space. But we did have about 15 people in there, and it wasn't bad. It really worked out fine. I recommend it to anybody. I don't know. I don't know if James wants me to recommend this, but I highly recommend anybody bringing the class there again, even if it's just for a play day. It was so good for the student. My students had never done this stuff, ever. And they didn't even know it existed. They didn't know what it felt like. They didn't know what the experience was. So a lot of people are maybe critical about like just free play, but there's something about just letting them see it and letting them go with it that I thought was really, really valuable. And actually a number of my students are trying to now use certain technologies for their thesis projects. I don't know how that's going to work out, but they're excited about it, so I think it's good.
I want to add, I think we need to advocate in the school that it should not be a special event when there's some kind of technology available. It should be ubiquitous, that anybody can go in and experience this. I think that by making this access so narrow, it sort of disinvites and disincentivizes people or encourages them to look elsewhere. So I think that in each of your departments, say more please. That doesn't mean instead of. It just means as part of, I would think. Another question, please. Okay, we got a few over here. As I walk right in front of the camera line, cut this out.
My question is I would say collectively you all mentioned, more than a dozen different software programs to use and using and trying. Savannah had 7 on just one slide, I think I counted. So, and I find, when I'm working with other people in the industry and graduates from other schools, they've got, this, that, and the other. And so as a faculty member, how are you introducing different softwares and finding ones that you've maybe don't even know how to use and helping your students navigate that? And as students, how many softwares do you try before you commit or, and then there's new ones next week coming up. So how do you manage that? Jacob.
I guess I could answer that. I ran into a lot of issues finding softwares that play well together. And so I'm still figuring out how to make something like that work. So it's always a process of learning new things. Like I'm definitely going to be playing with Clo very soon. I'm doing anything I can to make that happen in part of my space because now I know it's going to work, but it's been a lot of a process of trial and error for me.
I just want to comment quickly to that too. I just don't think we're in an era anymore where you choose a software and you hang your hat on that software. I mean, I came up as a Photoshop I was a Photoshop expert, passed the test, all this blah, blah, blah. None of that matters anymore. Because now what I need to do is bang around in the dark and I have a problem. I need to solve that problem. And to do that, I might need to use 3 pieces of software and use one little piece of those 3 different pieces of software. I don't need to know the whole software package. I don't need to know everything, but I need to know how to go find something that can solve my problem and figure out how to do that. I'm talking about my own practice, but that then is what I'm trying to teach a lot. And again, that's why I kind of talked about these intersectional skills. I think some of these things are really important, these fundamental skills that need to be really, really, really solid for our students. There's no question. But then on top of that, I think it's about them all being able to find their own things that will solve their specific problems. And I think as faculty, if we can try to get students to be more agnostic with software and just think of software as like, I don't have to be an expert in anything. I just need to be able to figure out how to use what I need to use when I need to use it. I think that's maybe more of the model that we're in now.
And I just want to say, Clo is running a free 30-day trial for anybody that, like, they're not even paying me to say this. I'm like an evangelist for the program. I found Clo, though, because I was trained in Optitex, And the barrier to entry to a regular person for that program is incredibly high, right? Students can't get it once they leave an academic institution. Most enterprises that are running it are very, very large. So I was constantly on the hunt for software that replicated that experience, but that as an individual designer could access. And I stumbled upon Clo through looking for animation software. Do you know, like thinking about like, well, this is kind of what I want to do. And Clo originally was just that. It wasn't for fashion designers. It was, it had a different name, Marvelous, and it was for people that were animating for Disney. And then they realized the niche, and I believe they're the only people in the market right now that offer a somewhat affordable license to an individual. Everyone else that's doing it, Optitex, Lextra, Gerber, we as individuals have no access to it. So.
Over here.
I just want to say that I'm so excited for you guys to be, sharing this information with all of us. I think that I teach in the fashion art department, and my name is Susanna Moyer. My background is at Parsons for the last 30 years, teaching while working in the industry in Europe and in the US. And I just feel like the innovation is blocked with the students, and the collaboration within availability to different things. Like, for example, to your point, and I'm really proud to be at FIT right now. I'm learning so much as I go along, meeting people, and I'm just so impressed with everybody that I'm meeting. But I'm working with the CFDA students right now, and a part of their project is to create a video on process. So I'm thinking about the virtual reality piece and how they could, meet with you guys and kind of explore different things. And if there's opportunities like you're speaking about, I think that could be a really good way to get the information out in terms of what we're doing here and the innovation on technology.
Could I say something? That was a great question. Listen to your students in terms of the software as well, too, what Brian mentioned, because I'll give you an example, Photoshop, the illustration majors. So much of Photoshop, and it's wonderful what could be done in Photoshop, but Chad, who also teaches Photoshop here, we have these discussions amongst ourselves. Many of the students, because sometimes the software gets clunky if they're on a laptop. So there are other softwares that have kind of developed, redeveloped, that the students are using, and then bringing it into Photoshop. And if you're not aware of that, you'll realize all of a sudden one day, oh, I didn't know about that particular one. And actually, that makes sense. It's more intuitive. Listen to them as well, too. And that's the age-old thing. It's going to be that issue for us all the time. There's any number of softwares, it looks to me, that can take care of some of the things that we're creating. Some are going to be better suited for us. When you interact as a professor with the teachers, listen to them, too, because they're going to introduce you to newer ones, too.
It's scary a little, too.
I'd like to second that. A lot of the newest software that we're using was basically introduced by students to us, and we found a way to implement it in several of our computers. But most of the newest software is generally introduced by most of our students.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Very informative. My name's Deanna Clark Esposito. I teach in the International Trade and Marketing Department. And one assignment that I have the students do is I ask them to take out a sheet of paper and draw what an importation looks like. So I teach international business law from a fashion perspective. And so I say, look at your shirt, take out a pencil, piece of paper, and draw. And everyone's like, oh, what do I draw? I don't know what you draw, what you're going to draw. This idea of sort of play or free, and it's one of the students' favorite activities. We cover the entirety of the board from basically the soil to the store. And in terms of tilt brush, I wanted to ask, is there a limitation on what can be done within that, or a timeline? And then do you export it as a video file? Because everybody kind of showed video files. So thank you.
I can talk about that. Tilt brush is when you're making something in Tilt brush, you're wearing the goggles. It's also being projected on a screen, generally, I think. So everybody else can see what you're doing. You can take pictures, you can take JPEGs, GIFs, video. save those however you like. And you can save the model so that someone else can go in and view your model or experience it. And then it exists as a file that then you can go back and revisit with the goggles.
I wanted to just add to that, there is a challenge, though, when you want to do something that's precise in terms of size, correct? Isn't that a challenge right now?
I didn't ever find that to be a challenge. Scaling is just like something you would do in Illustrator or InDesign with a layout. It's just something that you get a feel for after a while.
So you can translate what you're creating into something if you want to create something physical.
I think that if you want to, you can see the scale of what you're working on, whether it's like ant size to dinosaur size. And then I think that you can like take that probably into Rhino or anything else that you, depending on however you set up a file. But like we said before, if you're setting up a file, you just make sure that it's to the right scale and dimensions that you're working with.
Thank you. Question? I think I had one more. No? I think that this is a good time to eat lunch. Now, before we thank our presenters, lunch is served in the back. I will be in about a half hour or so letting you know when we'll be set up in the different corners. And but right now, just mix and enjoy lunch.